What can Justin do against the Clefairy and the gang on RAGHAV's side? You see his accomplishments, 2 international championship top 4s, as well as the 2018 NAIC finalists, as you were mentioning. But then, of course, our favorite accomplishment for Justin, Jake, Toxicroak versus the world, Philadelphia Regional Finals.
That was so much fun to watch when that one was going down. But Justin, again, a fantastic player from around this part of the world, too. Not a Texan, but a Texan by proxy. I'll give him that. He's been to a bunch of our locals here, and we love Justin here in Texas. Justin is using this team of Heatran, Amoonguss, Landorus, Therian, Chien-Pao, Iron Hands, and Fluttermane. Something that sticks out to me, Joe, there's no fighting move in that Chien-Pao. It's double dark.
Yeah, so I guess that is going to change the dynamic of how this matchup works if you want to focus on having both priority and then a non-priority dark attack. But on RAGHAV's, and we've mentioned so many times how great of a trainer they are with the NAIC finalists this past summer, losing to Alex Gomez in the finals, but then Toronto and Sacramento top 4s on this season. So on this new season, still performing very well.
An impressive run, at least 3 in a row regionals where RAGHAV has finished at least in the top 4. Obviously hoping to break through one further and get to the finals here in San Antonio with their team of Clefairy, Landorus Incarnate, Rillaboom, King Gambit, Hisuian Arcanine, and Ogerpon Wellspring form. RAGHAV, Joe, is the last warrior for Hisuian Arcanine. If we want that full sweep of Hisuian Arcanine at North American Majors in Regulation E, we're going to have one last shot at it with RAGHAV, and there it is right there on the field.
Also, one of the last soldiers for Ogerpon Wellspring Mask, as Hearthflame has definitely dominated the weekend. But Ogerpon Arcanine, that combo on RAGHAV's end to start game 1 compared to Landorus, Therian, and Amoonguss. It's actually relevant to say Therian in this matchup since RAGHAV has Incarnate.
Yeah, we've seen Landorus Incarnate pump out a lot of serious damage this weekend. Not going to be doing that on turn 1 here, possibly later on in this set. But for now, let's focus on these leads. The Landorus providing an Intimidate, which is useful for both this Arcanine and the Ogerpon. And then, of course, Arcanine intimidating it right back with that Intimidate ability as well. Amoonguss doesn't really care a whole lot, but when you're using a physical attacker like Landorus or the Ogerpon or Arcanine, gonna be a big deal.
Arcanine definitely a little bit threatened from a ground attack on the Landorus' end, as it's 4 times super effective. So RAGHAV will switch out here on turn 1, swapping in the grass type that would definitely take that hit a lot better. Amoonguss is also going to switch out on Justin's end, so one of these trainers are only going to have 1 attack each here. Iron Hands is revealed for Justin to have access to Fake Out on the following turn. U-turn is super effective into RAGHAV switch in there, so Landorus actually gets a lot of damage off on that turn.
Yeah, really smart targeting there too. The Arcanine in that slot did not have Protect, so there's no chance that U-turn could land into Protect and possibly leave it vulnerable to damage here, especially coming from this Ivy Cudgel that was originally targeting that slot. Amoonguss switches in and takes that beautifully.
It's almost a pseudo-ally switch, as Amoonguss started out on the left and then it finishes the turn on the right.
This is really great for Amoonguss too. Like Rillaboom and Ogerpon do not threaten Amoonguss at all. And while they're both immune to Spore, that still means Amoonguss has a lot of room to operate here. Pollen Puff is not known for its damage output, but is actually super effective against both of these targets.
There's a Fake Out into the Iron Hands to stop a potential Fake Out on that slide. Ivy Cudgel with the follow-up in to that. Doesn't actually do too much. Remember, Ogerpon was intimidated on the first turn, so that's why it did such little. Pollen Puff is super effective and brings Rillaboom down to under half of its HP.
And again, Amoonguss just kind of sitting pretty here. The Arcanine can switch in on it, but you have to be really careful about Justin possibly calling it with a Spore. And the Iron Hands as well has the option to Drain Punch either of these targets for some decent chip damage, and of course to hit the Arcanine coming in for super effective damage as well. Amoonguss also is a very free Pollen Puff into that Iron Hands if it wants to keep it healthy. That's kind of one of the benefits of using Amoonguss, is it sticks around for a long time itself, but more importantly can allow its partners to stick around even longer with that Pollen Puff. But Amoonguss actually swapping out immediately.
With 2 grass types on the other side, maybe thinking that the Spore obviously is not going to have any value, so I will save Amoonguss for later. Justin will swap the Landorus Therian into that slot to intimidate both of these physical attackers. RAGHAV is going to redirect the attacks towards Ogerpon Wellspring, and U-turn from Rillaboom should keep him safe, and whatever swaps into that slot is not going to take damage from Iron Hands.
No damage will be taken because of that Follow Me, and I like that Follow Me and U-turn play because it allows RAGHAV to get this slot in for free. The U-turn, rather the Spore that could have come out from Amoonguss would have been redirected to that spot, so no worries about being caught unaware with the Spore coming in. And now this Landorus Incarnate is on the field. Not threatened too much at all by the Landorus Therian on RAGHAV's side, and more importantly, a very, very good answer to Iron Hands. And I believe RAGHAV is running the Sandseer Storm. There's no substitute in this set but that means it has the option to damage both targets at once. And when you have nothing like a physical, like a special version of Intimidate rather, the Sanseer Storm is very threatening to Justin's team.
Yeah, to everyone except for currently the Landers. Therian as a flying type, whatever switches in on Justin's side also would not really want to take a Sanseer Storm or an Earth Power. So either this Iron Hands or potential Amoonguss on the swapping are not going to really appreciate a Life Orb Sheer Force boosted ground attack from RAGHAV. But for now, Iron Hands will swap out, and here comes the tried and true Amoonguss at full HP thanks to its recovery, but Spiky Shield will ensure that if U-turn goes into that slot, this Landers will not be able to switch out. Instead, it's the Stomping Tantrum, however, into the Spiky Shield Ogerpon, protecting itself, taking a little bit of recoil. The question is, where did the Earth Power go? Into the Amoonguss, and that's a lot of damage.
A lot of damage into Amoonguss, and more importantly, that's a kind of a catastrophic lock there for Justin. If he did opt for something like a Rock Slide or a Terra Blast, with the Terra Flying, that's a lot of damage being threatened, but now this Landorus Therian clearly trying to catch the Arcanine, switching in to provide an Intimidate for that Landorus next to it. Now is locked into Stomping Tantrum against a Flying type and Grass type, which is really not where you want to be, and now that RAGHAV knows that, the Landorus kind of has to switch out unless it risks, doing absolutely nothing. This could be a huge time for a Sanseer Storm for some big damage to catch both the Amoonguss and the Iron Hands coming in.
Yeah, if you call the Landorus swap, the other slot will be a grounded Pokemon that you can go for a ground attack, but first will be the Ivy Cudgel. Remember, Ogerpon has been intimidated twice, so that's not a lot. There is Sanseer Storm. Amoonguss will protect. Iron Hands is weak to this hit. That's super effective. Brings it down into the red, and there is no chance at the burn because of Sheer Force taking away the secondary effect.
That's just a really smart play. Given the Earth Power damage from the prior turn, it's very possible Sanseer Storm would have KO'd the Amoonguss there. So no need to worry about doubling it to ensure it gets knocked out. With that Ogerpon, no need to worry about a Spore, assuming the Sanseer Storm connects, of course. But more importantly, the Landorus there kind of has to switch. Again, it just has no pressure at all. It needs to reset that Choice Scarf and get itself off the field, preserve the Intimidate again for later on. And now the Landorus, again, we have the Fake Out, but no damage being threatened into it at all.
Spiky Shield from Ogerpon, Wellspring, but it looks like Justin did not target into that slot, so you'll not be punished. Landorus Incarnate protecting as well, so RAGHAV playing it very safe here in this game one. That Fake Out and Spore combination will both be stopped.
Yep, Fake Out and Spore do nothing into both the Spiky Shield and Protect. And again, this Landorus Incarnate rather, in still just a commanding position. The Landorus Therian in the back is the only thing that will either resist or be immune to those ground type attacks. It does have to kind of worry about the Ogerpon's Ivy Cudgel. I think the Ogerpon's at either -1 or 2 already. And if it comes in, it'll be down to -3. And so the Ivy Cudgels won't be doing a whole lot. It's kind of Justin's, nice little switch into the Landorus here. But at the same time, you can't switch both, and you don't have a second ground resist, and you can't protect either of these Pokemon on the field. So something's got to take a big, no, he does have to protect the Amoonguss. I misspoke there. But something has to take a big attack here, essentially, unless you're trying to play this as slow as you possibly can.
Where is your ground resist? And if the answer is protect, that's not necessarily the best answer. So no Pokemon will swap out for Justin. Instead, Amoonguss will just protect itself from a potential ground attack into that slot. Here's the -2 Ivy Cudgel. It is enough because of the critical hit. The last Ivy Cudgel we saw maybe barely did double-digit damage to the Iron Hands. That critical hit probably was the difference, and the Earth Power obviously going to go no damage into the Protect.
I guess, you probably Drain Punch the Ogerpon there, maybe for a little bit of health back and you get some damage on the field, but at the same time, there's still not a whole lot of impact that Iron Hands could have had. Even if it stayed on the field there, you're still locked with your Iron Hands and Amoonguss into this Landorus that threatens a whole lot of damage. The Fluttermane does come in here. It's actually something that really can threaten this Landorus, except Ogerpon still has Follow Me. So the Landorus, you can Dazzling Gleam to bypass that Follow Me, get the damage on the Landorus, but a Dazzling Gleam certainly will not KO Landorus in one hit. And of course, we have the option for the Terra Poison as well. Something we haven't even talked about yet is that Poison typing possibility on the Landorus, which would protect it from any kind of Fairy damage.
Yeah, in either of these positions for RAGHAV, either Landorus becomes a Poison type to resist Fairy, or Ogerpon terrestrializes and gains a boost to its special defense stat. So either way, RAGHAV has the ability to kind of answer somewhat this Fluttermane if it wants to go for a strong Fairy attack. Landorus will intimidate both of RAGHAV's Pokemon. There's the Spiky Shield yet again. So now it should be up to the Fluttermane, which does not actually get any damage off as Landorus also protects.
RAGHAV scouting out what this Flutter Mane wants to lock into. If it was something like the Moonblast, then you would want to take the next turn to possibly Follow Me. Now knowing it's a Dazzling Gleam, a Follow Me won't be very effective because it is a spread move. And more importantly, you see it lock into a Fairy move. But I also love that switch from Justin because knowing that RAGHAV is likely going to double protect there to scout out the Flutter Mane, you get the Landorus in, you can't double protect again to scout that Landorus, and now the Landorus has the option to possibly go for a Terrestrialization, get some Terra Blast going. I think the Terra Blast is going to be the biggest source of damage that Justin has at his disposal here.
Landorus Incarnate will Terrestrialize first. It is naturally faster than a lot of Pokemon, so on this turn it at least turns into a Poison type. Justin does not Terra either of his Pokemon on the field. Follow Me from the Ogerpon will redirect this Stomping Tantrum into that slot. That's huge, as the Poison type Landorus would have taken that super effectively. And here's the Dazzling Gleam. It is enough to knock out the Ogerpon.
You can tell Justin was trying to catch that Terrestrialization. I really like that Stomping Tantrum because it does still do a good chunk of damage to that Ogerpon, set it up for the Dazzling Gleam KO, and more importantly, now that the Landorus on RAGHAV's side has Terrestrialized, it is being threatened by the Stomping Tantrum. If Landorus had locked into like U-Turn or Rock Slide or something like that, Landorus could have stuck around a little bit more, but now Landorus on RAGHAV's side has to worry about the Landorus on Justin's side, which is the downfall of using that Poison Terra here. Even though you do protect yourself from that Flutter Mane, the Choice Scarf Landorus right next to it is the big issue.
Yeah, the RAGHAV might visually look like he's floating on a cloud in the Landorus, you know, the visual there, but because of that Terra Poison on its head, it's super effective and weak, I should say, to the ground attack. That critical hit also from Sludge Bomb shows just how strong Life Orb Sheer Force combination can be on Landorus Incarnate. And the Flutter Mane is still full health at this point, but so is Arcanine.
And I think importantly, the critical hit on Landorus there easily puts the Landorus Theory on Justin's side into extreme speed range. You know, even if Justin's Landorus switches out and back in to intimidate the Arcanine, that won't be enough to protect it from this extreme speed, and now this Flutter Mane is going to be locked into Dazzling Gleam against 2 Fairy Resists for the rest of this battle.
There is that Dazzling Gleam that you're talking about, and look at how absolutely minimal damage that spread Dazzling Gleam does to those 2 Pokemon. Sludge Bomb
is so much.
That's a neutral hit into the Flutter Mane, and it almost completely one-hit it.
I mean, this is a great position for RAGHAV to be in too, because Amoonguss does come in. However, the Landorus and the Arcanine both have spread moves that can bypass the Rage Powder for Amoonguss. And unfortunately, this Flutter Mane is holding the Choice Specs. It can only use Dazzling Gleam this turn, and so there's no chance to protect, maybe try to get a Spore off. If RAGHAV's able to connect their moves, either the Rock Slide or the Sandsear Storm for the spread damage, this should be a locked up game.
Landorus just barely hanging on. If there was a critical hit, that would have been enough to knock it out, but not to be for Justin here in Game 1. Arcanine recovering its HP up thanks to the Citrus Berry, and it will use that in recoil to knock out the Flutter Mane. So now all Justin has left is his Amoonguss, which obviously is not going to beat a Flare Blitz Arcanine.
No, this Amoonguss doesn't really have a whole lot left it can do. Earth Power here is going to take it very, very low, clearly in range for another Earth Power or a Flare Blitz. And Amoonguss, it did as best it could. It tried to Pollen Puff that Flutter Mane in case RAGHAV potentially went for some kind of inaccurate moves and missed a couple times. Like, that was Justin's way back into this game, so well recognized, but unfortunately RAGHAV, you know, took the 100% route, knowing that if the Amoonguss tried to Rage Powder away the Flare Blitz, it probably just got knocked out itself. There's not a whole lot left that Justin can do in this match other than hope that RAGHAV throws it away. And unfortunately for Justin, RAGHAV did not and takes the first game.
Yeah, RAGHAV is now 1 victory away from the finals here in San Antonio. And of course, Justin has the uphill battle needing to win the next 2 in this set against such an incredible trainer like RAGHAV. You saw, remember Rillaboom was there, but wasn't even necessary. That's how strongly RAGHAV was able to win that Game 1.
The Landorus Incarnate on RAGHAV's side of the field coming in huge. I really like the way that RAGHAV played that with that Landorus because it threatens so much damage at all times. You see, that's a neutral Earth Power. Amoonguss is known for being one of the bulkiest Pokemon in our formats, and it just took, like, what, 75% from that Earth Power, which is not even super effective. That is unheard of, how strong this Landorus is. And knowing that Justin Burns only has the 1 Pokemon that won't take much damage from ground-type attacks in his own Landorus, that is something that RAGHAV can abuse very heavily in this match, and it paid off very well.
Yeah, there's the Ogerpon going down, but by that point, it had just provided so much value. RAGHAV essentially didn't even care that it was intimidated 3 times. Just kept going for Follow Me.
And that's all it needed to Follow Me, and even threw out some pretty weak Ivy Cudgels, but that chip damage was enough to put things in range for that Landorus or for his own Arcanine. And so a very useful Ogerpon there, even if it wasn't the biggest of damage outputs, that Follow Me coming in very handy.
All right, so let's see what Justin can do here, making any adjustments in game 2, because if he does not, he will just be watching the finals of RAGHAV versus Geo. For now, it's Iron Hands Qianpao, which is a nice adjustment for him, but RAGHAV calling the change with a Clefairy next to Landorus.
Clefairy is here to protect its Landorus friend with its friend guard, and of course the Follow Me. I like this a lot. The Landorus was really the key for RAGHAV in that first game, so really just throwing it out right away, saying like, you're gonna have to deal with this straight up. Especially with that Iron Hands lead, it's a very good answer into Iron Hands and threatens damage immediately, but this Landorus Therian coming in to dodge any damage from ground type moves.
Landorus Incarnate will protect here on turn 1 for RAGHAV, and we've seen him protect many times, especially in that first game, so I was gonna say, I imagine the follow-up protect from Clefairy will also be locked in, so that means that Qianpao will not get any damage on this turn. We see it was targeting towards the Landorus Incarnate, but at least he does get to bring Landorus in for free for Justin.
Two like move choices on these sets that I want to point out here is the Clefairy on RAGHAV's end has Moonblast, as we saw earlier, which means it has the potential to break a possible Focus Sash on Justin's Qianpao. And also the Iron Hands on Justin's side that we saw does not have Heavy Slam, which is, it's been substituted out for Volt Switch, which comes in handy a lot of the time for repositioning, but unfortunately means that there's no Heavy Slam to threaten a lot of damage into Clefairy. So well used here from RAGHAV.
Stomping Tantrum into Clefairy, doesn't even bring it into the yellow. That's how bulky this EV-Elite user can be. It eats up the Icicle Crash as well, and there's the Moonblast. Look like Clefairy looking like Fluttermane out here.
Big damage to that Qianpao. I think a lot of times people just use that Moonblast to get a little bit of chip damage on, but when the Qianpao doesn't have a whole lot of special defense and it's also weak, that's a 2-hit KO there. Good for RAGHAV for not switching the Arcanine into the Stomping Tantrum. I was scared for a second there because Justin's been very aggressive with that Stomping Tantrum, thinking maybe he possibly targeted the Landorus slot, but thankfully for RAGHAV, the Clefairy hangs on through those 2 attacks, does not get flinched by Icicle Crash, and breaks that Focus Sash. Importantly, you know, the next attack that Qianpao takes probably knocks it out, and also it's probably in range for an extreme speed from this Arcanine, which still does have to worry about Stomping Tantrum. Landorus is a -1, but it's double super effective. Arcanine will not appreciate taking that. It does have Clefairy to protect it, but it is threatening this Qianpao heavily.
Qianpao, since it was so afraid of being knocked out from extreme speed, as you were mentioning, Iron Hands will swap into that slot. Clefairy also switching on this turn, so might be in store for a bit of a slow grind between these two trainers here in game 2. Rillaboom goes into that slot, setting up the grassy terrain, and there will be recovery on the field for currently all the Pokemon except for Landorus. We are going to get a Terastallization here on turn 2, and it's out of Hisuian Arcanine, going towards Terra Fairy, getting rid of that ground weakness in case Justin went for a Stomping Tantrum into that slot. So does RAGHAV make the right call? Yes, he does. Stomping Tantrum is now just a neutral hit, hardly doing any damage, and massive. Landorus gets burned.
That's a really good turn for RAGHAV. That Landorus has been a big threat this entire time, not only because of the Stomping Tantrums, but the Intimidate is relevant into this Rillaboom and Arcanine, and if RAGHAV, well, I guess it doesn't matter anymore because he can't Terastallize a Landorus, but getting the Landorus on Justin's side burned means that the big damage threats with possible Terra Blast, a Stomping Tantrum, even a U-turn into Rillaboom is a big source of damage. This Landorus is now being neutered heavily by the 50% damage reduction from those physical moves. Iron Hands comes in as well, another physical attacker that really doesn't want to get burned. If you want to invest your Fake Out into the Arcanine slot, that's kind of the only way, but RAGHAV also has a Fake Out of his own.
Justin might just have to use Landorus in his traditional role as a Rock Slide flinch bot because it's been burned, so the offensive output is just not going to be there for the rest of this match. Fluttermane swaps into that slot, and Hisuian Arcanine will switch out for RAGHAV into Landorus Incarnate, going to save that Intimidate for later. Iron Hands with a Fake Out into the Rillaboom, so that means no attacks are going to happen this turn.
One thing that RAGHAV does still have to worry about is this Fluttermane. The Landorus on Justin's side might be burned, but it still does have Intimidate, which means it can mitigate the damage coming out from this Rillaboom, make sure those Grassy Glides aren't doing a whole lot. And RAGHAV notably does not have the option to Terastallize this Landorus anymore, so any Moonblasts coming that way will be full power. The Clefairy in the back does have Follow Me and Friend Guard as well, but also is pretty low itself. Probably can't take more than 1 or 2 attacks from that Fluttermane for the rest of this game.
Landorus swapping onto the field, intimidating both of Raghav's Pokemon, of course, only mattering onto the Rillaboom as a physical attacker. Clefairy will swap onto that Landorus position for it. It's pretty low at HP right now, so is definitely threatened, has the chance to be knocked out at some point. That Woodhammer does a lot of damage, and here's the benefit of having Volt Switch is you're able to have, you know, kind of the U-turn, Volt Switch, Volt Turn, as they like to call it, right? You have that available with Iron Hands and Landorus combination.
I like that Volt Switch a lot too. Your damage from Iron Hands there isn't going to be super relevant, and by switching out the Fluttermane and using a slower Volt Switch to bring it back in, you make sure it gets back onto the field without taking any damage, and now it's going to be able to face down this Rillaboom and Clefairy. Again, the Clefairy pretty low. Certainly one Moonblast from the Fluttermane should knock it out. Maybe even a Dazzling Gleam based on how these Pokemon are trained. And especially the Dazzling Gleam is an issue because, you know, once the Clefairy goes down, the Friend Guard also goes away, which means that there's no more protection for the Clefairy's teammates.
The other thing, though, if you potentially Terrasilize to get as much damage as you can out of a Choice Specs Fairy Dazzling Gleam, then you're no longer neutral to the Sludge Bomb that Landorus Incarnate has in the back.
Yeah, I think at this point, if the Fluttermane and the Landorus is on the field, you can really only attack with Fluttermane if you know that the Landorus gets knocked out by whatever it's going to use. And I think in order for that to happen, the Clefairy needs to go down.
Fluttermane will swap out here, so Justin just kind of baiting, showing Raghav that he has Fluttermane to have the presence, and it's available to attack whenever he wants, but not for now. Iron Hands instead will swap into that slot. Clefairy providing a helping hand to the Rillaboom to boost its damage. That U-turn does absolutely minimal damage into Rillaboom since he is burned, but now you're going to have a helping hand boosted attack. It's either the Chien-Pao for the knockout or into the Fluttermane.
I think anything that might come into that slot, it depends on where this is going, right? If the Woodhammer is going into the Iron Hands, I think the -1 helping hand Rillaboom probably doesn't knock it out. If it's going for this Fluttermane, though, that's a big deal. Woodhammer actually into the Iron Hands, though, so a big chunk of damage, just over half. But thanks to the Intimidate coming out from the Landorus, Therian on Justin's side, able to stick around at least one more turn.
I was very much worried for the Fluttermane on the switch in case that Woodhammer with the helping hand boost went towards that slot, but luckily for him, it is not. Now Rillaboom and Clefairy are both around half HP, but they are recovering health with the grassy terrain.
They are, yeah, and especially because the Arcanine on Raghav's side has Terrestrialized away from that fire typing. Fluttermane's actually becoming a big issue here. The Rillaboom and Clefairy have both been chipped down. Something like a Specs Dazzling Gleam or Moonblast is going to be going a long way here. There's no more fairy resistance on Raghav's team, which means either Landorus or Arcanine coming in here likely has to take a big chunk of damage.
Here is the Hisuian Arcanine. This Intimidate is only going to be valuable onto the Iron Hands, and what does Justin go for on this turn? The Clefairy will protect itself and get even more recovery at the end of the turn because of grassy terrain, so probably putting it above 50%. And here's a neutral Moonblast into the Arcanine, but Friend Guard OP as Arcanine is able to endure that hit thanks to just the sheer presence of Clefairy.
Friendship saves the day here for this Arcanine. That's a massive survival. Now that the Arcanine has come onto the field, the Clefairy still has the option to redirect a Moonblast. It is healing up with this grassy terrain, which might come in handy here. It might be pretty close for this Moonblast. I think a Specs Fluttermane probably has enough firepower to dispatch it, but even if you do go for a Follow Me, that means Arcanine has a turn to fire off an attack. Maybe go for a Burn into Iron Hands, maybe try to get some damage on this Fluttermane. I do like that Moonblast play a lot, though. I think a Protect on Clefairy and a swap for Raghav is probably the safest play, and Justin, knowing that maybe he's a little bit behind on damage, tries to start pumping it out. Even if the Clefairy opts to go for a Follow Me this turn, it probably gets knocked out to Moonblast, and you have the option to come back in with Fluttermane later on and get some big Dazzling Gleams or Moonblast off, but opting to save it for now.
Yes, Justin will swap that out into the Chien-Pao, who we have not really seen since turn 1 when it took all that damage from the Clefairy's Moonblast. Here now, Clefairy will Follow Me and redirect the attack away from the Iron Hands. Flare Blitz is obviously going to be more than enough, but Chien-Pao was kind of in a spot that it was probably not going to be able to get onto the field safely at any point. So Justin's going to need a different win condition. Iron Hands does get the Volt Switch out.
I really like that Volt Switch. Bringing in the Chien-Pao there means that you are getting knocked down in that slot, which isn't super optimal. But when in conjunction with the Volt Switch, it means that at the end of this turn, Justin just gets to select 2 things to come onto the field without having to worry about switching into any damage. In this case, it's going to be the Fluttermane and the Landorus. I like this a lot because the Fluttermane and Landorus can combine their Rock Slides and Dazzling Gleams to probably KO the 2 things you see on the field. Even one Dazzling Gleam from Fluttermane, it might just be enough on its own, but Landorus there to help out. And looking at the rest of Raghav's team, the Arcanine not the Arcanine, the Landorus and the Rillaboom in the back really don't want to be taking these attacks from Fluttermane either. So a really well-positioned game from Justin here, where he didn't get too much damage on the board very quickly, but playing this kind of war of attrition where he was waiting and waiting and waiting until the perfect time to get these Pokemon on the field and be able to fire off attacks without risk, and that time has finally come.
Iron Hands will swap in, and now is the time for Justin with his back against the wall. His tournament life on the line here in Game 2. Terastallizing the Fluttermane into a Fairy type, boosting its damage from its Fairy attacks thanks to that same type attack bonus. And this Dazzling Gleam is going to be massive. Not going to do anything into the Clefairy.
Is that a double?
As it just protected this turn, but the Extreme Speed will hardly do anything from the Intimidate that Landorus had the prior turn, so Fluttermane takes that considerably well. And here is a Dazzling Gleam with the boost and Choice Specs, neutral hit into Hisuian Arcanine, takes it out.
I like that a lot from both players. The Terra Fairy there really confirms those KOs both onto the Arcanine and the Clefairy. So that Fluttermane now is a pure Fairy type, boosting its damage from the Dazzling Gleam. And the Iron Hands swap there is great because both of these Pokemon on the field would have been knocked out. Bringing in Iron Hands means that you have the option to go for a Fake Out on this following turn. You have the option to either Fake Out the Rillaboom coming in to prevent something like a Grassy Glide, or even try to match the Fake Outs with Clefairy, maybe prevent a Helping Hand. You can actually Helping Hand before Fake Out priority-wise, so I like that swap a lot because Iron Hands gives you a lot more pressure than the Landorus would have locked into something like a Rock Slide or a Burn Stomping Tantrum. But again, like you said, Joe, the Extreme Speed really great into that Fluttermane because that puts it in a little bit lower HP, which might make it a little bit easier to finish off with the Grassy Glide, and the Terra Fairy on Fluttermane a little bit telegraphed from Justin there, so well capitalized.
Especially if Clefairy has the Helping Hand into the Rillaboom there, that 30 HP that Fluttermane is missing might truly be the difference between victory and defeat. There is Helping Hand from Clefairy to try to get around a potential Fake Out into that slot. Rillaboom, Helping Hand Fake Out to the Landorus, down to 13 HP. Here's the Wild Charge. Clefairy just barely hanging on in this spot. In the red, that is huge because RAGHAV can either follow me or Helping Hand or Protect just to be a problem. That's a clutch survival.
And all of those things on top of Friend Guard is still active, which is really big for RAGHAV. Friend Guard has been such a big piece of this team, even just in this match so far. And now Rillaboom and the Landorus in the back still have the option to play the game next to this Clefairy, which can help them survive a few more turns. The Helping Hand Fake Out I think is actually a really cool play because you have the option to maybe knock out this Landorus in conjunction with the burn damage it took. Unfortunately for RAGHAV, not the case this time, but it also would have done a big chunk to the Fluttermane. Like if the Iron Hand's on the field there, kind of has to stay on the field or else you're just giving up a lot of momentum. And so the Fluttermane either stays on the field and attacks, in which case you can Fake it out because it's terastallized, or you try and get the KO with your Helping Hand Fake Out, which not something I've seen very often on stream, but I think it makes a lot of sense given the circumstances.
So funny to see just how valuable a small, not fully evolved Pokemon in Clefairy can be in VGC thanks to that EV held item. Grassy Glide is going to be enough to take down the Landorus, and Justin remains with his final 2 Pokemon down a game right now. The Volt Switch goes into Clefairy's Protect, who's not even going to be able to swap out, and he'll have to bring in Fluttermane on this turn.
The grassy terrain from Rillaboom has been so clutch for RAGHAV in this game. The Clefairy certainly would not have survived the prior turn without it. Thanks to some of the recovery it had gotten in between these attacks it was taking. Fluttermane returns to the field here. It looks like it's still in range where a Helping Hand Grassy Glide might be very close to a KO, but again, it's still just starting a lot of damage with either Moonblast or Dazzling Gleam. Iron Hands on Justin's side is going to be able to stick around for a little while, but if the Landorus on RAGHAV's end comes in, it will almost immediately just be knocked out by either Earth Power or Sandsear Storm, so you really have to make the most of this Iron Hands before the Landorus can knock it out.
And that Rillaboom has the Assault Vest held item, so it's going to be able to take these special attacks a little bit better, of course, with the assistance of Friend Guard as well. Follow me. Clefairy has become the center of attention as if it hasn't stolen the spotlight the entire series here in top 4. Clefairy goes down. Rillaboom hangs on in the red, so that means you can get one more super powerful Wood Hammer off on this turn before you recoil knockout yourself.
It's gone.
Fluttermane is down. Who knows knows if that prior extreme speed damage was exactly enough for what RAGHAV needed to take out Flutter.
That's huge. The Wood Hammer KOing there, even though the Rillaboom is going to go down this turn to this Drain Punch, it really doesn't matter a whole lot because the Landorus is just waiting in the back, waiting to come in and feast on this Iron Hands, the one Pokemon in the metagame it is the strongest into. This is such a perfect situation for RAGHAV now, as all they really have to do is come in, use their power once, and punch their ticket into finals here in San Antonio.
Absolutely massive victory over Justin Burns, one of the best players in North America, doing it with some pretty great and interesting Pokemon, Clefairy, Landorus Incarnate as well. There's the Earth Power to take it, and we're gonna have nothing but California love in the finals here in Texas as RAGHAV Malaviyya will face Giovanni Costa for the title of San Antonio Regional Champion.